This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Jamie Glazov Moment. Tonight, why the Islamic terrorists targeted children in Manchester. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know now about the horrific, diabolical Islamic terrorist attack on Ariana Grande's concert in Manchester. And the Islamic terrorists singled out children, and they did so on purpose. And this is something that we have to be very honest about and something that we have to courageously look at. And we have to get the message that Islamic terrorists are sending us. This is a message that is very meaningful and it's very symbolic in terms of everything that it says about the death cult that we're facing. So ladies and gentlemen, why did the Islamic terrorists target children in Manchester just recently? They did so on purpose. I'd like all of you to get Anna Geifman's book, Death Orders. She's a brilliant scholar. Her book, Death Orders, is vitally relevant for today. And Dr. Geifman studies death cults. She's an expert in Bolshevism, in Nazism, in Hamas, and other Islamic terrorist groups. And she shows that these are all death cults. She documents how they focus in and target their terror on innocent civilians, and including and especially children. And this is very important, very crucial for us to face, and we just saw it again. Now, Dr. Geifman in her writing, for instance, shows, she documents how, for instance, the 12-year-old members of the Hitler Jugend were exploited and used by the Nazis, and they were equipped with hand grenades and sent up against Soviet tanks to blow themselves up. We know that this is exactly what the Palestinians do in terms of how not only do they target Israeli children, but they sacrifice their own children. And so when we look at this, at Hamas and at Islamic terrorism today, no different on these levels than Nazism and communism, etc., in many ways, but they're death cults and they practice infanticide. And I wanted to take a minute or two just to discuss with you why. Because we should not overlook what just happened. There's a reason the Islamic terrorists targeted children. Anna Geifman was on my show in the recent past, and I talked to her about this. You can watch the 2 longer episodes. Just put in Anna Geifman, Glazov Gang, Hamas, targeting of children, and you'll see the 2 episodes. But Anna Geifman talks about this, that, for instance, in the Jewish tradition, there is a commandment to choose life. The Bible teaches that it commands that life must be chosen. Death cults do the opposite. Dr. Geifman on my show discussed who are children. What do children represent? And children represent the future, and they represent life. And Dr. Geifman stressed these 2 things. When we look at Islam, we look at the death cult that it represents. We look at Islamic terrorism. We look at ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all the ways that they're fulfilling the mandate to wage jihad. We see the opposite. And when Al-Qaeda boasts that we love death as much as you love life, what they're really speaking about is how much their ideology venerates death as opposed to the Judeo-Christian tradition which venerates life. Now, everything that I may say here, or some of the things that I believe, it's not necessarily everything Dr. Geifman believes. I'm just saying that you need to go read her work, and these are some of her main themes. On a personal level, what I would like to say at the end when I was reflecting on what had just happened in Manchester, and this is something that I've given my whole life, much of my life, to thinking about. As a Christian, and for those of us who are Christian, and our Christian perspective, when we meditate and we reflect on the miracle of Christ's death on the cross and his resurrection and the redemption and that salvation, that wonderful, wonderful, generous gift that Christ gave us as a Savior. But when we reflect on these things, there is another thing that comes to mind, obviously, and another entity that comes to mind, and that is the battle against evil and the battle against Satan. And as Christians, we are aware of the existence of Satan, and we know what Satan hates. And Lucifer, Satan, hates children the most, because children represent innocence. They represent God's innocence. And the devil is waging a war on that, and he hates innocence the most. And I want to leave with just these two thoughts and these two extremely meaningful passages from the New Testament and how they connect to what just happened in Manchester. Let us not forget that Jesus Christ said, "Let the children come unto me." And let us not forget that Jesus' most dire warnings, or at least one of his most dire warnings, was to those who harm children. And he said it is better for a person to wrap a chain around their neck that's tied to a heavy stone and to throw themselves into the sea than to harm a child. And we know that Islam is going specifically against that warning. We know that Hamas is, and we know that these Islamic terrorists go exactly against all that is sacred and all that is innocent, against everything that represents life in the future in their targeting of children, because that's what death cults do. I'd like to dedicate this Jamie Glazov moment to Safi Roussos, an 8-year-old little girl that was one of the victims of the attack in Manchester. God bless you, Safi. You're in our thoughts, and of course, Safi represents all the young children and all the innocent lives that were lost in Manchester. And Safi represents all the children that have been sacrificed in child sacrifice by death cults. And you are in our prayers and in our hearts. And we leave with this, that in recognizing and respecting the memory of Safi, this episode is also recognizing and giving memory and respect to all the victims of a death cult called Islam. We'll see you on the next Jamie Glazov moment. Good night.